Welcome to another episode of the Mr. Therapist and the Counselor Podcast. Jesse O.
This week, Jesse O, Mr. Therapist, we process. That's the episode.
We're processing today. And I just want to remind you out there that you can find our podcast on Spotify. You can find it on Apple Podcasts and YouTube. And I think we're on Google Podcasts as well.
Most major streaming platforms.
Most major ones. And please, if you get value from the show, share the show, subscribe, and follow us. Appreciate you guys.
Check out our whole catalog that's available now. So
Yeah, got a lot of cool guests and topics.
here we go. Jesse, this is how we usually start the episode.
Jesse, I feel like I always come in awkwardly to these things, so I just need some advice. Like, how would you come into this show? Like,
How would I start off a podcast?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to show you today, step by step.
Uh,
One thing that whenever we have a topic, like I want to warm up. So the concept of this episode, and I don't even know, the concept of the show is going to change so much, but we have so much going on in our lives and our experiences, and that's what we want to bring to the forefront here with the podcast. So we're gonna talk about our process and our experiences. So we're just gonna jump right into it. I wanted to talk about the last episode that we did, you and I believe, right? And we talked about attachment styles.
we did, yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
which I was somewhat familiar. You were more familiar with it than I was.
Yeah.
I know you wanted to talk a little bit more on that, and then I also wanted to bring up something that we had mentioned.
That's right. Yeah, last was like two episodes before. Probably that's when the attachment styles episode
I'm
came
so
out. But
confused
yeah.
right now. What episode is this?
I think I don't know, but anyway, if you look back, there's an attachment styles episode, and so we're gonna come back and add to something like to that episode, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
We're gonna add so much.
Yeah. Do you want to start?
No, you.
You want me to?
This
Okay,
is your
gotcha.
time.
Oh,
this is
man.
your time.
Man, you're awesome. You treat me so well.
You-
So,
You know it.
so the only thing that, like, looking back at that episode, I feel like the only thing I didn't get to say because we ran out of time is just to say that, like, I think the way we were explaining it was like these different personality types, right? And it's not really so much that way. I guess I wanted to just clarify that, like, if you identify with any of the insecure attachment styles that we talked about, that you can work through to become secure, right? And so, like, if you can process your emotions, if you talk to a therapist, if you work on these things that make you have an insecure attachment style, like, you can work through to become a securely attached person. So I just wanted to share that. It's not like, if you're insecurely attached, like, you're just going to stay that way, right? It might be lifelong work you do, but I think you can develop that secure attachment. So that's all I wanted to add to that.
That's beautiful.
I know it is, right?
So you said we ran out of time. Truth be told, like, we have all the time in the world, right? We can keep talking and talking and talking, but I wanted to wrap it up because you floated a question at me.
Yeah.
Here's the thing: when you're recording, I think you do look for those moments of, like, when's a good time to end this episode? This is all still really new to us. But what was the question you asked me that you wrapped it up, and then I wanted to talk about Goose and Maverick, and I felt like I was on the highway to the danger zone, so I wanted to detour. I was probably getting hungry too at that time. But what was the question you asked me about attachment styles?
I think I asked you, like, you mentioned that you identified with the anxious attachment style, and so I think I wanted to ask you, like, how does that manifest in your relationships? Like, what do you notice about your relationships that informs you that you're anxiously attached?
When you asked that question, were you talking about, like, my more intimate relationships? I'm not saying specifically with my wife, but, like, throughout, like, my life and relationships with women, or were you just kind of saying in general, like, friendships? Were you talking about, like, work relationships? What do you think?
I'll let you decide, I guess.
Oh,
like, yeah,
well, help me out,
whatever,
bro.
Yeah, I think whatever you feel. I guess when I asked you that question, I wanted to know where your head went. Like, what relationships kind of came to mind? Because when I think about it anyway, the way my head works is I'm reading over the traits of an anxiously attached person, and I'm like, damn, I am this way. And I think about the relationships that, those features have presented in, right? Like the feeling insecure, the feeling like I'm not enough, the feeling like like, yeah, like, that happens sometimes in my relationship with Abby. That happens sometimes in my relationship with other professionals. So,
Would you say it feels like I'm dodging the question again? Was it duck, dodge, and dive, or
yeah,
you could
the dodgeball.
dodge a Manny question? You
Can I
could
ask you a question?
maybe. What's up?
What's coming up for you as like I ask you that? Like,
Oh, well, no. So I'm thinking about what you're.
yeah.
We brought this up here. I didn't really put any thought into it except for like, ask me the question again. We talked about this before.
Okay.
So for me, like, I think that thing that really like is relevant that really pops up first is like, how can you be secure in a relationship when you have way too many insecurities still?
Mm,
I think that whenever I'll look back on my past, even my relationship with my wife right now, I feel like you have to be very secure and confident to gain some momentum with somebody you're seeking out as a partner, if it's dating, if it's whatever it is, right? So I think I could be my best self in those moments.
yeah.
But going back to like the insecurities, like I feel like in relationships, at least throughout my life and even currently, like I'm still look for a sense of like validation from my partner, even though initially like I guess I don't want to say we always need validation, but I mean I did want to be like, oh, does this girl like me, like, check the box yes or no, or
It's
maybe,
important
right?
to you,
Yeah, so but you're in that mode of like confidence, and you're just going to push through, and you're going to
Yeah.
fight for that, and there's a good chance you get rejected, which is can be very disappointing, but
yeah.
so that's what comes up for me, because I'll say this, is that, and I'll relate this to questions like working with clients ask me often. They'll ask me for advice and feedback, and we've talked about that. I don't give out advice. I most definitely will give out feedback, which will turn into advice sometimes accidentally. But one thing I've told clients is like, do not talk to me about relationships, because I feel like that's still like not one of my strengths.
Okay.
I feel like that's something where even currently I continue to work on and get better, and I could still be a very insecure person. All my past relationships, a lot of times, like I would not ever really end those relationships. I would wait until somebody else popped up,
Okay.
and then it was kind of okay for me to like let go of that other person.
Oh,
Does that make any sense?
Like it was felt too unsafe to end something if you didn't like maybe have another person that you were
yeah.
sharing with. Yeah.
I'll say being a guy, and we've talked about this before, at least this is how I feel speaking as a man. There's times that like women are a way to brag, right? I would do this sometimes, and I'd probably bullshit it sometimes. I'd always be like, well, I'm talking to this girl and that girl. It's like I almost felt like I had to have like
Sure. Yeah.
a top
It was,
five
like,
or
clout,
like
right?
yeah, like an ammunition of like to make sure people knew like I'm manly enough. I'm like I'm it's that seeking validation as a man. So to what I'm trying to go back to my initial point was that like I felt like any relationship I had to make sure I had something to fall back on
Right.
before I left one for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And unfortunately, in a lot of ways, that would lead to me being manipulative or maybe gaslighting women in my past relationships. What's gaslighting? Just for anybody that's listening.
Manipulating, right?
Yeah,
Like,
basically, like
turning
telling
something
them.
around. Like if you're to blame, you turn it around on them. And
Right. You
yeah.
make sure the other person feels they're crazy when you're the
such a
chaotic.
hot term. It's gonna be good for our SEO.
Whatever that means. Once again, you're so bilingual. You just bust shit out sometimes. It's impressive. So, but like, so yeah, I think that's what, that's where I think my attachment style lies, in the idea of just being anxious and,
Okay.
I mean, what does it sound like to you? Like if you could just therapize me in the most
No, I mean
friendship type of way.
Yeah. No, I mean I feel like you've answered it right. Like there's an insecurity. I mean I don't know. We're all trying to understand like our patterns in relationships. So I don't want to therapize you. I trust what you're saying. Like it makes sense. And I think you're also going to be doing therapy soon, so you'll probably find out a lot more.
Never.
A lot more about your relationships, right? And like how
Right.
you get affected. But I appreciate you sharing that part of you, man. Like
Thanks.
that's cool. I think that's why I think we started this podcast in the first place. If we have these conversations outside of a microphone, it's a little harder to have them with a mic and a camera on. So
Yeah.
yeah.
The other thing that I wanted to talk about was one of the questions we brought up on the last episode too was I'd asked about your ideal guest,
Okay.
and I threw that out there, and I told you like today actually I said I didn't really even like. I mean, I liked who I said, but I felt like there was probably more to it, or maybe I just kind of blanked.
He doesn't like you, Dave Batista.
I love Big Dave. I'll always love you, Big Dave, no matter what color you're wearing. Blue, red, yellow, it doesn't matter to
He's
me.
a Crip today. He's wearing blue.
Yeah, I get it. Next week we're going to talk about gang colors. But what, man.
Threw you off on that one.
This is good. This is so good. But we talked about ideal guests, right?
Yeah.
And you said you wanted to bring on the Crips and the Bloods for an episode.
No,
Okay, sorry. Sorry, I can't leave this one alone. I have so many jokes like surfacing right now. But no, I brought up ideal guests, right? And I didn't like your answers. Not the Jesus one, even though you thought I didn't like the Jesus one.
You gave me a look.
I didn't give you a look. I probably had like we could have this big conversation, but I don't want to say I disliked your. Let me take.
Which ones did I say? I said Ed Milet.
Which I didn't know who that was, anyways,
Okay,
right?
you look him
How
up.
long have
He's
you
a
been?
billionaire, I think.
How long have you known this guy, or like this guy? Look up to him.
Probably like 4 years.
For reals, 4 years? That
Yeah,
long? Okay,
yeah.
4 years. Okay.
Yeah.
And then the other guy you mentioned was potentially Elon Musk, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
How long? Oh, you don't. I mean, how long have you been like interested in Elon Musk?
Probably the last 3 years.
3 years.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I guess I just wanted to I'll ask you why those. Once again, maybe revisit that, and I wanted to bring up something that you had processed yourself this week, right? About success. I don't want to prompt it that way. You take it.
Yeah, so I mean, we talked a little bit about this, but you mentioned like you noted that one of my lessons from the past week was like how like this money mindset thing, right?
Can
And
you share a little bit more? So this past week, right? Some things came up for you,
Yeah.
and you said you had this like you realized that you have this. You just said it, this money
yeah,
mindset,
this
right?
money mindset. Like I have this like part of me that like chases money and that like needs to chase money and almost like this anxiety around like making money, and I think it affects my business. It affects the way I do business. It affects like everything, right? And so yeah, so I have that. So you had mentioned that like that I met that the two guests that I brought on were billionaires, right?
Yes,
And they were
yeah.
like money. That's what
I'll tell you what I said. I was like, you bring up these people that, the billionaire aspect, and I was. Money, I can't say money's not important to me.
Yeah.
I've never had a lot of money. I'd sure like to be Biggie Smalls and like
Yeah.
see the more money, more problems type of situation. But so I for me, like a billionaire, I can't relate to that person. And I mentioned creatively as well, right? Like
Yeah.
that doesn't speak to me as somebody that I want to have a conversation with. Not that these two men, I don't know the one guy so much, Elon Musk, sure, that'd be like probably fascinating conversation,
Yeah.
right? So, but why are you so fascinated by that?
The funny thing is, like, I think the last interview he had with Joe Rogan, I thought he wasn't a very good interviewer. He wasn't talking
Elon
about,
Musk?
Yeah,
Was that the one he was baked?
I don't probably. Yeah, I don't know. But you said why? Like,
Yeah, why
the-
are you so why?
Well, I mean, when you posed this question, I think in the moment I was on the spot and I was like, damn, who'd be cool? And probably because they have money, right? And so I think,
But why is that so cool or fascinating?
well, I think it goes back to like this idea of what I think is successful or even as a man, like what I think a man should look like, right? And it's not necessarily healthy, but I think there is with the lesson that I learned, there's a part of me that like, yeah, like I want to be rich. I want to have all this money. I think like I over-identify with money. If I have a lot of money, then I'm good enough. I'm a good enough provider. I'm a good enough person. I'll be accepted and seen, right? And so I think there's probably an unhealthiness to that, and it's probably driven by that money mindset thing that I talked about, right? That like, and we did a live the other day about worthiness, and like I think that was a real important insight for me of like the big message there being, man, we're worthy just the way we are. And so I think when I'm healthy, when I'm thinking in a healthy mindset, like I'm not driven by this need for money to prove myself. So yeah, so I mean, we're connected. We're connected here and live in the moment. I think that's probably why. I probably was just raised to give a shit about money that much. So
Yeah, I read this quote one time. I think it's from this guy named Ian MacKaye. He's from this band called Minor Threat, and he was in a band called Fugazi. I think he had this quote.
Yeah.
So don't quote me on this, but he said success is in the doing. Or no, I'm sorry, success is in the being and not in the doing.
Yeah.
And when I read that too, it was in a hotel in Seattle, and it was like on the wall, and I kept repeating it over and over again. So Ian MacKaye, I was like, it must be something like pretty deep, and I'm like, what is it? But I've realized throughout, working in the field, like, and just throughout my life and experiences, like, maybe what I thought success was like to have lots of money, to have a big house, to have, cars or whatever it is, right? Toys,
Yeah.
all those things. But I see people enter therapy, and I say to them, like, you're successful today. Because to me, like, being vulnerable or being open
Yeah.
or challenging yourself to change, that's success.
Yeah, for sure.
It's not a dollar amount. So
I agree. Yeah, that's true.
I know our mind gets clouded with like what is important, because that's what the world we live in.
Yeah.
But I hope for you as well, like, it's just like you are very successful.
Yeah.
You
I
have
appreciate that,
so
man.
many things that are like right in front of you, and I don't think you don't take your family and what you do here like for granted, but like I do.
Yeah. No, I do too.
Yeah.
I do too, especially when I'm taken over by that mindset, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's, I think we all struggle with something, and I think that's just like lately I've been diving into like what I've been struggling with, why
Yeah.
there's times where I feel like, the clients I have is not enough, or the money I have is not enough, or what I'm doing is not enough, and a lot of times it's driven by just this core feeling inside of me that I'm not enough.
Yeah.
And so I can attach that to money, and it's probably what had been brought up as to why I picked those two people in the
Right.
first place, right? It's like, man, I want to be like them. Like,
I don't want you to have to revisit it right now, but maybe think about, I don't know if you can think of a different guest or ideal guest. And like I said, I mean, it's always interesting just to talk to different people from different ways of life. Like most of the people I mentioned are celebrities. So, but maybe I do want you to think about like who to you like is somebody you'd really like to sit down with and talk. And if you don't know right now, that's okay. I did want to mention like the couple people I'd mentioned, and then a couple other people I thought of James Gandolfini from The Sopranos, just because I grew up like watching him, and he was so fascinating to play like this almost sociopath type of character, but then he seemed very mild-mannered whenever he was in interviews. And then I thought about Anthony Bourdain. You know who that is?
it sounds familiar.
He's a chef. He had committed suicide about 3 or 4 years ago. Famous chef. He dealt with like addiction throughout his life. And I started to like put it together, like all my idols are dead. Or like, a lot of my idols or maybe when I say idols, are people I look up to or people I'd want to talk to, like they're either passed away or they're maybe they've had some kind of known history with like substance abuse. So
Yeah.
I'm always fascinated. I'm still drawn to like the darkness and why people go down there,
Yeah.
because it's kind of like, part of trying to figure out like, why am I still this way?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Shit, dude. I appreciate you asking that question. It's the first time I got real uncomfortable in a podcast,
Yeah,
and I kind of live for that. Like I'm like I want to get there. I want us to like have these types of vulnerable conversations. I know we got a little bit of time left, but I want to bring something up. Can I bring something up?
Can we
From
do?
this week?
Is it the Barbie girl thing?
Yeah, dude. It's a
I think
Barbie
that-
girl.
So if we were in therapy right now, we had like 1 minute, and your client wanted to talk to you, what would you do?
Do I have another client coming in? Oh man! All right. So boundaries is what you're saying.
I'm saying boundaries. I think
Yeah.
that this is most definitely, we can keep them on the edge of their seats
All right.
as we break down
Okay.
Barbie girl.
All right. You talked me into it. So we're trying to keep these short. Let's commit to that.
Okay.
And
So yeah, you're wrapping up a therapy session. How would you do it?
usually what I do is I say, hey, looks like we're coming to our time. Our time is up. And if we're mid-conversation like we are now, it's like, why don't we put a pin in that for now? And we'll kind of explore it next time.
Thanks for the process, my friend.
Absolutely.